Bullshit.
Storytelling can make or break your leadership. It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO and founder of Massolutions, your no bullshit marketing firm. We all have go-to outlets that we follow for video, to read blogs, etc. Throughout my career, one that has been since very early in my life, a mainstay for me has been Harvard Business Review. And I began reading that in college and just found it so fascinating because Harvard Business Review was, in my opinion, the best of the best. And they did both research, they combined science, they combined art, they combined data, they combined real life experience, and they would teach. And they'd give you practical learning. They'd give you evidence of things to do. So Harvard Business Review has been a part of my leadership since I was in college. And I remember when I was first in a job doing a turnaround of 2 radio stations at about 21, 22 years old, I had Harvard Business Review coming to this radio stations that were struggling financially. And I remember I had a couple of raised eyebrows from some of the older staff members that were there. But recently in my feed, my Harvard Business Review feed, it came an article from Jeff Gothelf of Harvard Business, writing for Harvard Business Review, and the article was "Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership." And again, it's Jeff Gothelf, and he also has a book called Lean UX, and I'm going to put that in the show notes, and I'm actually going to check it out myself. So Jeff writes this article, "Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership," and he begins the article, which is what I love. He begins the article with an anecdote, and the article begins with this anecdote about him saying that a very large company wanted to bring out their new OKRs, objectives and key results. And they have these new OKRs, which, first of all, they have this term they want to go and unveil, and they're going to talk about it. And it's a big picture thing. And they make the presentation to middle management and then employees, and it falls flat. There's no enthusiasm, and things struggle on this initiative. And what the author is talking about is how that happened because of storytelling or the lack thereof. And that's why he's emphasizing something that you've heard me say again and again. So think about what this means for me. I am an avid reader of Harvard Business Review and have used it throughout my career, and I now see a writing and a post in both the digital version and the print version of something that I've been writing and speaking on for years, and it ends up following many of the things that I tell you again and again and again, and that we at Massolutions do for our team, our clients, and we do as a team for our clients again and again and again. So the article says storytelling can make or break your leadership, and then it goes on to tell that anecdote at the big company that where the major initiative failed. And then it says, here are 5 tactics or elements of storytelling that the author has found work again and again and again. And I'm excited to tell you the first one, number 1, says be audience specific. And he even says it sounds simple, but it isn't. And if you recall, one of my most recent podcasts and videos was about how people misperceive marketing and think it's simpler than it is, and others think it's more complex than it is. Well, one major element of marketing that is misperceived as simple or already being done is segmentation. And that's when he's talking about being audience specific. So he's saying it's not as simple as it sounds, because you have to do what we call the real drill down. To become audience specific, you first have to truly define that audience, and that takes heavy lifting. But you have your own existing data, which gets you part of the way. Your own existing data is gold, and I've found company after company not maximizing their own existing data. to study very quickly the Pareto Principle. Now, we have the Pareto Principle Plus, and we've built way upon your 80-20, but you can quickly do your 80-20 to see that 80% of your business comes from about 20% of your customers. That begins to show you who your ideal customers currently are, but they might not actually be ideal customers. So that's a whole nother story about how we have to really define and do the real drill down. So the first thing is be audience specific in this article from Harvard Business Review. The second part of being audience specific is he actually says, if you want to know what your audience is thinking, ask them. We talk about how significant marketing intel is by talking to your key target audiences, existing customers, prospective customers, internal stakeholders, external strategic partners, everybody, and doing it qualitatively, because that's part of being audience specific. So the HBR article about how storytelling can make or break your leadership has the first tactic for you to use is be audience specific. And it says there's two ways to do that, being audience specific. Both might sound simple and you might think you're doing both, but in reality you aren't as well as you could be. And the first one is segmentation, drilling down that target audience and clearly defining the main target audiences, using multiple variables, using the types of variables, and having the requirements of effective segmentation. And the second part of it is asking those people what they think and feel, and then listening and responding. So that's all part of number one, be audience specific. Number two, he talks about conceptualize your story. Conceptualize your story. Now, this is significant. What does conceptualize your story mean? You've got to give people the framework, the reason. I talk about the two whys becoming your one big idea. Your first why, your why or reason for being, and your second why, your customer's why or reason for buying. But on every single initiative, every single time you're going to talk to your employees as part of B2E, business to employees storytelling, you need to give them the reason. Why are we doing this? But what the author adds is a great little addition that I'm going to continue to use now. He says, not only do you have to give them the reason why we're doing this initiative, you have to give them the reason why now. So when you're conceptualizing your story, the second point from the Harvard Business Review article, Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership, conceptualizing your story involves giving them the reason why and giving the audience the reason why now. The third point is humanize your story. You've heard me talk about it on podcasts, videos, in blogs, keynotes, workshops. I bring up the Seinfeld storytelling approach. And the third part of the Seinfeld storytelling approach is that stories are about people. So when a Harvard Business Review article talks about humanizing your story, I say yes. I've been talking about that, and it's true. You need to make sure your stories are about people. So when you tell an anecdote or you make an analogy, you make it about people. Interestingly, the statistics all show the massolutions content that gets the most from viewership and downloads and listenership and reading and forwarding are whenever I tie in stories about sports or pop culture or my family. That's when my content works the best. Why is that? Because that's humanizing the story. You're hearing about me as a person, not just someone preaching at you, which I try so hard not to come across as, but I realize it's going to happen. So when you humanize your story, you make that story about people. So this example that the author gives at the beginning, talking about this leader who has this major initiative of objectives and key results, and it falls flat, telling that story in a way that applies to people. Maybe tell a story about a customer and the people at that customer and the customer's customers that articulate why that major initiative is important. And then segue into a story about an employee that does a major task and that other employees can relate to, because then that humanized the story. The fourth is make it action-oriented. The fourth from the Harvard Business Review article, Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership, is make it action-oriented. And it talks about how specificity reduces ambiguity. Specificity reduces ambiguity. Well, what do I talk about a lot? I talk about how ambiguity breeds mediocrity. And I talk about how the more specific you are, the more you can achieve your goals, and it also reduces anxiety. So I talk about how structure reduces anxiety and ambiguity. They're talking about how specificity reduces ambiguity. We want to get rid of ambiguity because ambiguity breeds mediocrity. So I'm giving you specificity today. I'm telling you Harvard Business Review is a place that has impacted me a lot. It's a great thing to read for personal and professional growth. But then I told you about a specific article, and the article's title is Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership by Jeff Gothelf. And then I went into his things that he's seen that have been important for storytelling. There are 5 of them. And I'm now giving you specifics about how those 5 tie to many things we've talked about in videos, blogs, and the podcast. But I'm giving you specific ways to work through that. So now when we say make it action-oriented and that specificity reduces ambiguity, talk about in your story some specific actions that are going to be taken. What we do at Massolutions is we quickly tell clients that we have a trademarked system, our intellectual property, multiple trademarked intellectual property systems, and one is called the 100-Day Activation Planner. And it's our way to bring specificity and a sprint to any project that we're working on that is more than a couple of weeks. So if we're working on a project that is going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we put it into the 100-Day Activation Planner model, which shows the key initiative, shows the responsible parties, shows when it's due and when it's done, and we work from that. So that's specificity. So what I'm giving you is, I'm saying to you, you need to also take and tell specifics in your stories so that the audience can relate to it. And then the 5th one is keep it humble. So in this Harvard Business Review article, the 5th key storytelling trait is to keep it humble. And what I want to say is the article talks about humility and vulnerability. And it's important that you think about these because when you show humility, it shows the capacity for growth and learning. And when you show vulnerability, it actually builds trust. And that's what we as leaders need to do. We need to build trust. So keep it humble. Point out your vulnerabilities. It's okay to say, I'm sorry I made a mistake, or I'm sorry I was wrong on this, and here's specifically how I'm going to fix it. That's going to build trust with those around you, whether that's peers, subordinates, or your boss. So keep your story humble and use humility and vulnerability. And so when we go back through this, there are the 5 points from this Storytelling Can Make or Break Your Leadership. They've all been things that are tied back to what we've talked about on the No BS Marketing Show, what we do for clients, what we've done on video, workshops, keynotes. Number 1 is be audience specific. Use marketing intel to ask them what they think and use the real drill down of segmentation to get that target audience specific. Number 2, conceptualize your story. You want to not only give the reason why you're doing whatever that initiative is, you want to say why now. Number 3 is humanize your story. The 3rd part, ironically, 2 3s, the 3rd part of the Seinfeld storytelling approach is that stories are about people. Humanize your story by bringing people into the story. Make it action-oriented because specificity reduces ambiguity. And since ambiguity breeds mediocrity, we want specificity. Give specifics in the story so they can make an impact and give specifics of where you're going. And number 5, keep it humble. Humility and vulnerability show a capacity to grow and learn, and they build trust. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion about the article that Storytelling Can Make or Break Leadership. Jeff Gothelf of Harvard Business Review. He also has a company, and he wrote a book, Lean UX. We'll have all that on the show notes. And again, thanks for listening to another episode of the No BS Marketing Show, recorded in our own studio in bold, beautiful downtown Pittsburgh. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.